Here's a boondocking pop quiz. If you stumbled upon this site, would you camp here if your goal is quiet and solitude? Pretty. It's got a fire ring with some, I would say, pretty recent. It's spring, so I would say pretty recent garbage in it. Beautiful swimming hole.
There ain't nobody gonna do it for you. You got to mind your own.
Hey friendlies, I'm Carolyn, and welcome back to my RV life. You know, it's not that I don't like people. I really do like people. But I like people on my terms. And that means living full-time in an RV, being on the road 5 years like I have been. That means that I don't like being crowded by people when I'm camped on public lands. If I wanted to be surrounded by people, I'd stay in an RV park or a campground, or, you know, I'd go more to national parks and state parks and things like that. I'd pay to stay at campgrounds. But I come out to public lands so that I can be alone. I like my solitude, and then I people on my own terms. That's how I like to do it. And I know many of you are the same. You like your solitude. So today I'm going to give you 5 tips for finding solitude. I'm going to tell you the things to look for and the things to avoid for avoiding the crowds and finding a beautiful place of heaven all to your own for the 2 weeks that you're there. So I'm going to share with you all the tips, everything that I've learned 5 years on the road about how to find solitude and avoid the craziness, especially the last couple of years through the pandemic. It's getting harder and harder to find solitude, and with the movie Nomadland, it could be kind of hard the next couple of years. So I'm going to give you some tips, and be sure to stay tuned to the end to find out if you got the right answer on the pop quiz. Let's get started. I'm going to start at number 5, and I'm going to count down to the biggest thing you need to do if you want to avoid the crowds. So number 5 on my list for finding solitude and avoiding crowds, or even sometimes other people, is to forget about the apps. There are a lot of great apps. I've used them a ton, including freecampsites.net, Campendium. There are a lot of great apps that'll help you find free camping on public lands, in national forests, on Bureau of Land Management lands, which stands for BLM, state forests, even Walmarts. So those apps are indispensable, and anybody who's on the road definitely should have them. But at this point, and they might be good if you're just starting out, to kind of help you get a feel for the land. But if you're really comfortable boondocking, traveling on public lands by yourself, if you've been on the road a while and you're kind of getting sick of the crowds of the last year, you need to put the apps away if you want to find solitude, or at least those apps. Everybody's using them. I don't know how many people are on the road now, probably at least 1 million. Everybody goes to where those campsites are on the apps. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that the more people who use those apps, the more campsites they're going to post on these apps. It's going to be harder and harder to find spots that nobody else goes to. I'm in one now. So if you want to find solitude, forget the apps and don't put your campsite on those apps. Sorry guys who run the apps and everybody who uses them. I know. But yeah, so forget the apps and learn how to use Google Maps. Use the satellite view. I use that a lot, and like I've said in other videos, it's especially easy to use in the desert because you don't have tree cover to get in the way of the satellite view, to be able to scope out really great roads. For the most part, roads can be a little trickier, but definitely you can see big openings, and sometimes even in the forest you can see that. So you want to use Google Maps satellite view oftentimes with another app that helps you see where the public lands are, because you always want to make sure you're camping on public lands. You never want to go somewhere where where it's no trespassing. You don't want to be on private property. So use one of the apps for a public lands layer, so that you can see where the public lands are, and then just start exploring the roads within those areas of public lands. And a couple of my favorite public lands apps are US Public Lands, and the newest one I'm using is Free Roam, and I think both of them There might be a minimal charge. I can't remember, it's been so long. But there might be a minimal charge for both of them. But forget the apps, go out, explore by yourself. Sometimes that means driving around for hours, you know, and that means sometimes driving on scary, unknown roads. But if you really want your solitude, that's the price you have to pay. And another tip for finding solitude in your RV life, or even in your camping life, or at least relative solitude, is to not go in the popular places, not to go in the easy places. I'm at this reservoir here. It's just like a county reservoir in Wyoming that has picnic areas around it, and it allows you to camp here for a few days for free. And when I first got here, the road automatically leads over to the other side where most of the picnic areas are. It's the easier road. It goes to the dam. It's just kind of where everybody seems to go. And there was a spot over there, and I thought about camping over there, but I was like, no, I bet it's gonna get a lot of traffic. And I've been here for about 2 days now. I opted to come on the other side of the reservoir, so I doubled back, came around a road that wasn't as obvious. It went by this bathroom up here, which nobody was up here. So there's like 3 or 4 trailers on the other side of the reservoir that were just parked there. So I opted to come over here and explore. I'm the only one over here. There's been very little traffic, maybe 2 cars a day. And I'm looking over there now and I see new people camped over there. So I knew I've been doing this long enough to recognize when I'm gonna get company. Most of the time, not all the time. Sometimes I'm surprised by that. But the places like this, especially around water, and I've said that before, you usually want to avoid water, but it's after Labor Day, it's the middle of the week, and it's been pretty nice. But even with that, even if you're not around water, or even in other places, other boondocking areas or dispersed camping places where you think people might come, don't go to the best spots. You know what? I guess that's the tip. Don't go to the best spots. Although that I'd argue that those are the best spots over there. But they are the easiest. They're the most, what's the word I'm looking for? They're the most conspicuous. They are, it's just kind of, that just seems to be where the road leads. So sometimes if you want solitude, that means backtracking, that means exploring a road that you're not sure about. It means, and I think this is the common theme, it means going where people aren't. And sometimes it works out. You know, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time actually it does. So that's another tip for finding solitude. Yeah, I have this whole side of the reservoir all to myself. And it's nice because Sadie and I can just run around. I don't have to worry about her bothering people. It's nice. And number 3, my third tip for finding solitude is to go beyond the crowds. No matter where you go, but especially if it's on one of the popular camping apps like Campendium or freecampsites.net. Everybody congregates in the easy to get to, like the super easy to get to places, especially the bigger rigs, the big fifth wheels, the big trailers, the big buses. They all congregate where it's really easy. And that's where a smaller vehicle comes into play. I'm in a 24-foot, I can go a lot of places the bigger rigs can't go. So even if you are using one of the apps and you go to where a published campsite is, a published dispersed camping area, find roads and go past the crowds. One of my favorite camping spots in Anza Borrego is back behind, there's like 100 rigs that park in this spot. You take the road a quarter mile back and half mile back and you're completely, almost, at least a few years ago, by yourself. So a lot of people like to congregate in all the same places. They follow the GPS coordinate of the app and they say, okay, I'm here, and they don't bother to explore anymore. So if you like to explore, you know, you're not afraid of maybe taking some back roads and some unknown roads, you're going to find some really, really great places. I have found some of my best boondocking spots within a mile of where all the crowds are. So just go beyond the crowds and don't be afraid to explore a little bit. And another note on that one, on going beyond the crowds, if you don't have to be tied to the internet, if you don't have to have a cell signal, if you don't need the internet to work like I do, there are a lot of really, really good spots. Most people these days want to be connected, and so they'll go to the camping spots where there is a cell signal, and I've seen endless miles of BLM land where there's no cell signal and there are no people. So if you don't have to be connected and you you don't mind being off grid for a while, go to those places where there is no cell signal, and you're going to be able to find some great spots. And now for number 2, this is what to avoid. Absolutely, positively, if you want quiet, if you want solitude, absolutely at all costs avoid OHV areas. Any place that is the sand dunes in the desert and anything that's like a designated OHV staging ground or whatever, oh my gosh, you're never ever going to be alone. You're never going to get peace and quiet. I understand OHV, quadding, four-wheeling. I understand that that's a lot of fun, but it's getting really hard to get away from them. It's given everybody easy access to everywhere. They don't have to, put the effort in to walk or hike, and people just joyride, through the forest on their OHVs, and, we all have to share the forest, so I understand that, but for people who really like to kind of just go and get away from it all and really experience nature, it's getting harder and harder without the noise and in some cases damage of the OHV areas. But if you're looking for a spot and you want peace and quiet, just avoid OHV areas at all costs. And they're usually pretty well marked. There's signage you can see usually on maps and things like that where OHV areas are. And once you get on the road a while, you start to recognize the signs of OHV areas. Another thing while I'm on this is you want to avoid, I'm not equating the two, but I didn't make this its own number, so I'll throw it in here. You're going to want to avoid shooting ranges for the most part, unless, sometimes they're not like crowded and you just might get intermittent access or intermittent noise, shooting noise. If you don't mind that, then it might be fine. Some friends and I we're looking at a spot up in Leadville, Colorado. She ended up staying there. She didn't mind the shooting noise. I couldn't handle it. It was just pop, 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 pop. And she said the day I was there was the worst it was all week. But I don't have tolerance for that kind of noise. The longer I'm out here, the less tolerance I have for noise, the less tolerance I have for fast-moving things. I spend so much time out here that sometimes, even at the gas station with the stupid screens at the gas pump, are sensory overload for me. And so I'm hypersensitive more than ever to loud noises. So you're going to want to avoid any areas that have signs of shooting, any areas that have signs of partying, a fire pit with a lot of garbage in it, with a lot of broken glass. You can definitely tell shooting ranges because oftentimes they're like berms or hillsides just covered with garbage and TVs and anything that people can shoot, and of course lots of bullet shells. So OHV, shooting, partying areas, if you want quiet, if you want solitude, you're definitely going to want to avoid those. And now, number 1, the biggest thing you need to avoid if you want quiet. You probably already know what it is. But let's go back to last summer in Leadville, Colorado, when I first got the idea about shooting this video, where I started shooting clips for this video. And finally, my number 1 tip for avoiding people, if you're living in an RV like me, and you would just rather not see people when you step out your front door, the number 1 tip for doing that is to avoid this. Yep. Water, whether it's a stream or a creek or a lake or a pond or a reservoir, always attract people. So if you want to avoid people and enjoy some solitude and some peace and quiet like I do, you definitely want to avoid the water. So here I am next to a creek. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 campers right up there. It's a 1.5 mile walk from my camp, which is much more quiet, and I have much more solitude at my camp. And so that's a price I'm willing to pay, that I don't necessarily need to camp right on top of the water. It gets me out, it gets me exercise, Sadie enjoys it, and I can come in and enjoy the water when I want to. I can have a picnic, I can, have a nice hike over here, and then I can go back to my RV and I can enjoy my solitude. So if you're like me and you want to avoid, crowds of people and you just want some quiet and some solitude, although this is beautiful, it sounds really nice, every once in a while you might luck out and you might find a spot like this that nobody else knows about or that they can get to. But for the most part, if you want quiet and solitude, you need to avoid water. So boondocking, solitudinous, can I make up a word? Solitudinous, solitudity, boondocking, pop quiz. You want solitude, you want to be left alone. Seeing what you have seen, I've already spoiled it. Would you camp here? I'll give you a few minutes. Near, 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 near. Okay. If you said yes, you would camp here, thinking that you would get solitude, you would be wrong. Like I said, I might camp here on a Monday. This time of year, I probably not. I probably wouldn't. It's pretty. It's got a fire ring with some, I would say, pretty recent. It's spring, so I would say pretty recent garbage in it. Beautiful swimming hole. You can see tracks across the way of quads or four-wheelers, so when this is a little lower, it looks like they probably ride across. You got a potential tent site, or yeah, because there's 2 fire pits here. Get in the way. So a tent site there, a parking spot there. And on the way in, you noticed this, which I immediately thought this is a backup campsite. So this is see, a car can pull in. There's a tent spot back there. There's a fire ring. Nobody would camp here if there was nobody down there. So this is where people camp when there's somebody down there. This is just a creek that feeds this watering hole down here, this swimming hole. So my experience tells me this is a really popular swimming hole, probably for the locals. And that if I camped here, I would, at the very minimum, have people walking through my camp. Maybe not so much this time of year. It's still a little cool for swimming. It's only 60 degrees today, 64 degrees. It's Monday, by the way. I don't know that, I did see a sign on the post. I think there were people down here on the weekend. So at the very minimum, if I camped here, I would have people coming through my camp to swim, maybe even fish. If you don't want people walking through your camp, I saw one truck go down on my walk so far on a Monday morning. But yeah, if you want to avoid people, you know, if you like to be alone, you don't want strangers, even at night. There's a very good possibility this is a local party spot at night. And if you're a woman alone, and you might get nervous that somebody's going to drive up into your camp at night, I would not camp here. But even for couples or men alone and you just want to be left alone, this is not where I would camp. For one thing, this is a creek, goes all the way through the canyon up there. This is the only, and it's dammed right here, but you can see, yeah, that this goes through the canyon. And there is a road up that goes up, but this is probably the only swimming hole, maybe even fishing hole, for miles. And I'm only a couple miles from a town, a small town, but a town nonetheless. And so yeah, if you answered no, I would not camp here if I didn't want to be disturbed. I know I'm going to get shit for that. It's not your forest. I know it's not my forest. And you answered no, I would not camp there. You are absolutely right. Okay, so there you have it. My 5 tips for finding solitude and quiet and peace and nature when you're boondocking, living in an RV, van, schoolie, whatever you live in. And it really doesn't matter what you live in. I think even if you live in a giant trailer or a bus, if you follow some of these guidelines, some of these things that you should and shouldn't do, I think you should be able to find some solitude. It definitely helps if you have a 4-wheel drive, if you have a van or a truck, and I think the next best thing, at least for me, is this 24-foot RV where I'm still able to get off the beaten track and go and find my own little pieces of heaven. So I hope you found this interesting and helpful. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate you being a part of this journey with me. And I just appreciate each and every one of you. So I'll see you next time. In the meantime, be happy, be free, and be kind. And find some peace and quiet. What is Mom doing on the roof? What is Mom doing on the roof?